This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com. Hey everyone, do you have a favorite movie that you would love to hang on your wall but you can't think of what scene or what poster to get? Well, now you can get the entire movie on one high quality canvas. With MoviePalette.com, you can get every scene from your favorite movie, or more specifically, the dominant color of every scene from your favorite movie in chronological order on a great high quality canvas. It also comes with a silver engraving of the title down at the bottom. It has rubber stoppers on the back to keep it from bouncing. And they have a huge catalog of what to choose from. Whether you're a horror fan, or a fan of sci-fi, Marvel, Japanese anime, Disney animation, drama, or Oscar classics, there's a movie palette for you. Right now, MoviePalette.com is having a sale for 50% off for their Halloween sale. But if you go right now and if you enter room 15, you'll get 15% off of the movie palette of your choice. That's ROOM15 for 15% off of your movie palette. Again, this is a great value for a great piece of home decor that looks great for any film and for any film buff and anywhere in your home. You will definitely like this product. Mine is of The Shining, and I could not be happier with it. So definitely go to MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Hey horror fans, welcome back to Road 237, back with another review. As I continue my month of October run through of Stephen King film adaptations, and this is one from the early 90s, actually 1990, but it's one that I have never seen, and I know this is probably going to come as a shock to a lot of people because this is considered a cult film. People either really dislike this movie, they only see it for its flaws, or it's the kind of campy cult film that people love for its flaws. I wouldn't call this a major title. It's based on a short story from one of his collections. Even though I got into King at a very young age, probably 8 or 9 years old, most, if not all, the King films I saw at that time for the first few years were either rentals or on cable. I remember seeing the VHS of this at the video store every week. I remember this was on cable quite a bit when I was a kid. I still never saw it. And it is part of this movie and TV collection that I've had for some time, and I still haven't seen it. Until now, it is the 1990 cult film Graveyard Shift, which, yes, is part of his first collection of short stories, Night Shift, which this might be the most adapted collection of short stories book that King has done, or the book with the most adaptations, I should say. I mean, the stories from Cat's Eye, this, Children of the Corn, Sometimes They Come Back, Trucks, which was Trucks and Maximum Overdrive, Lawnmower Man, Mangler, Gray Matter, and then a few short films. So yeah, quite a few has been taken from Night Shift. And as I've said before, the 90s was not a very good time for King films. You did have the really bad TV miniseries. Even the theatrical films were not doing that well at all, aside from a Misery, Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile, Dolores Claiborne, stuff like that. I would put this in the realm, it's nowhere near the god-awful, like, say, Lawnmower Man or The Mangler. I would say this is more in the realm of, say, Children of the Corn or even Maximum Overdrive. Nowhere near the balls-to-the-wall, just absurdity of Maximum Overdrive. I would say this is more of like a Children of the Corn type, where there is a level of camp to it. It feels like it's trying to be serious, but it's its camp and its low budget nature really gives it this sort of cult film, and almost teetering on so bad it's good. Now, it was directed by Ralph S. Singleton, screenplay by John Esposito, based on Graveyard Shift by Stephen King, stars David Andrews, Kelly Wolf, Stephen Mott, Andrew Divoff, who would go on to be the Jinn, the evil Jinn in Wishmaster, which I am not a fan of that film. I know a lot of people are. I never liked Wishmaster. And, of course, the great Brad Dourif. And Brad Dourif, he's like a modern day, or even at this time, in the 70s, he was like the American Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee or a younger Vincent Price, where no matter how small his role, he still gives it his all. Because he's not in this movie very much, but the scenes he is in, he is just almost that same energy that he put in films like Exorcist 3, which came out the same year, is in this. In fact, there's even, he kind of gets his Quint from Jaws kind of a monologue in this. A bit more over the top, not as subtle as Quint in Jaws, but involving Viet Cong and rats, same kind of story. Peter Stein did the cinematography, and Brian Banks and Anthony Marinelli did the score. The score was nothing really worth a mention, but the piece during the end credits was kind of interesting. It's like these heavy, like, industrial tribal drums with audio samples of lines from the movie put over it. Kind of interesting sounding. Released October 26th, so it got a Halloween release. Made for $10.5 million, gross just over 11.5, so it didn't really make that much. Apparently, this was shot in Harmony, Maine, which I do know where that is. Apparently, the mill got the name Bachman because of Richard Bachman. And I guess the restaurant and the ending was filmed in Bangor, while also being filmed in Corinna, Maine. It didn't say anything about the time of production, because I've heard that this was made rather quickly. I mean, from the first day of shooting to the completion of the editing and everything was like 6 months. And it was really rushed to get that Halloween release. Now, I guess what makes this work is that this is a very focused movie. It's, or at least work enough to be watchable and entertaining in its own way, is that it is very focused. It is another supernatural King film, but only in the sense that this is really just a classic creature feature monster movie. It's, just this monster that lurks down in the basement or down in the caverns underneath this textile mill, and it's killing people off. It's that simple. I mean, it's not your typical supernatural King film where it's like other dimensional or otherworldly. It's just this mutated monster. It kind of has a Roger Corman feel to it as well, especially when you get to see the look of the creature, which I don't think is as bad or cheesy as a lot of people think it is. But the texture of it's kind of weird. It made me think of the end of Hellraiser when we get the up-close shots of the hooks going in, the way this cheap latex looks. It kind of has that texture. And it is this weird bat-rat hybrid giant mutant of some sort. Not sure where it came from or why it exists, but it is just there to eat people. And that's what it does. Um, Other than that, this has Maximum Overdrive, almost Maximum Overdrive level performances. It, Dave Andrews as the lead, he's supposed to be like this Clint Eastwood kind of drifter named John Hall. It does have Western influences. You know, the drifter comes in looking for work, has the love interest, has to take on the boss. He becomes the hero. Most shots of him are in such a way so that it's like he's looking up, but he's always got like this one eyebrow. He's like watching people talk. Really good with the slingshot, which comes into play. Very quiet. And you get Stephen Mott as the boss, Warwick, who his performance is almost like Yeardley Smith in Maximum Overdrive. Not in terms of over the top, but most memorable. Now, I don't know if they were trying for the main accent in this. The boss's accent is not a main accent. He almost sounds like, well, one, he looks like an older John Barenthal. And it's almost like this, an Irish Winston Churchill is almost what he sounds like. I'm trying to think of some of the lines. Like, yeah, he does over-exaggerate the lack of R's in words. But I can't even describe what that... It's an accent I can't even think of what it sounds like. It sounds completely made up. It's like someone trying to do Maine, but it comes out as like Irish, but mixed with other shit. And it just makes his lines sound weird. And he's supposed to be like this very intimidating, ferocious kind of boss. But then he talks and he just sounds kind of silly. What were some of those lines? Even this one scene when he's offering this extra work, he's just like, well, y'all better welcome. He bites into an apple like ferociously. And basically the story is Drifter comes in, gets a job working the picker at this textile mill. 4th of July, they shut down for a week. You get the idea that this place is not up to code. It needs to be cleaned. So he hires a group of people to work during shutdown, during the graveyard shift, to clean out the basement, get everything looking nice. And they're all picked off by this giant bat rat thing. Which there's also a shit ton of rats. Probably the horror movie with the most rats since probably the original Willard or Ben, which there is a character reading the book Ben in the background in the scene. That's probably a nod or an Easter egg. And that's basically it. Brad Dourif is the exterminator, and a lot of his scenes are just either kind of being like Dale Gribble, just like this, gotta get in the mind of a rat, and just being a crazy exterminator. But the scene when he's talking about the Viet Cong feeding people to rats, he gives it his all, and I laughed when that speech was over because he tells this horrific story about how Viet Cong, served rats to people, trained them to taste the meat, and then they can go off and eat people from a distance. And then just at the end, he sits down and he's like, yeah. So yeah, maybe I'm a little prejudiced. I just thought that was funny. And yeah, it does do kind of a good job at not showing this creature. I mean, usually just see shots of the tail, or maybe it's claws, just a little bit, just to know there's a giant something down there. Or like when it's going after someone, you'll get some like up close of its open mouth as it goes in on someone. It is kind of a slow reveal. Like we see that, but then like one character's sitting there, like when he turns, the head's right here, and then we get that shot of the mouth again. So I like how they waited till the very end to show this thing. Which even then, you don't ever see it full body, and I'm guessing this movie was rushed so much that there was either a lot of problems or they could only make like just enough of it. Some parts don't anatomically make sense. Like I'm guessing the long thing that kind of has like the thorns is like the tip of the wings, like when the wing goes like that. But so they're all cleaning, and I will say this is one of those horror movies that makes you want to take a shower after, not in like a gross sense, like you feel just like diseased or dirty, like if you watch New York Ripper or you, films like Taxi Driver, but just in like a generally like hygienic dirty sense, because this is one of the sweatiest, dustiest, just grimiest horror films I've seen in quite a while, and sweatiest. I mean, everyone is always covered in sweat, covered in just dirt and dust, and you can really feel the heat. Like you can tell that these characters are, stifling down in this basement. So the atmosphere is fairly strong. My favorite thing overall would have to be the matte paintings, which, if you don't know what those are, it's when someone would paint a background and then it would somehow be superimposed onto a shot. Um, a lot like in Universal classic monster movies, you would have like a character walking by, but the background would be a painting of like a mountain with the castle on it and the moon and the clouds. It'd be a painting. Once they get way down into the cavern underneath everything, because we're all down in the basement, they find a trap door, they go down, and now they're down in these tunnels where all these rats and this giant thing live, and that's where they're all mostly picked off. But they come to this giant opening, which is just a mountain of skeletons that goes all the way to the outside, or all the way up to the cemetery outside. And so like it's this beautiful wide shot where the actor's like this big down at the bottom, and the whole thing's like a painting. I think the mountain of skeletons was part of the set because we see them climb up it, but like the cavern wall, ceiling, this little pond or whatever, the opening where we see the textile plant through the opening, that's all matte painting. I love the look of it. Although it did give me more of like a low budget Roger Corman feel than it did, say, like a Universal classic monster movie. This made me think of more of like the cheesy, campy, sort of drive-in Roger Corman type look. But I still loved it. It still looked awesome. And there's not really a whole lot to the characters. I mean, we're really just waiting for all them to get picked off somehow. There is this one guy, I think his name was Brogan. His job during the cleanup is to just spray the fire hose at all the rats as they're cleaning. And whenever he's spraying the hose, he lets out this long, like, John Goodman scream or yell. And it just goes on. It's so aggravating. I will say there is a brutal death involving someone where they walk into this mausoleum. Kind of like the death from Creepshow. The sarcophagus is kind of tilted because it's like sinking into the ground. It slides and it like pins the character up against like the wall of the mausoleum, and then it just like falls, so it like skids their head against the wall, and then it just sinks into the ground, takes them with him. Yeah, pretty grisly kill. Other than that, it's not really a gory movie. I mean, there's even a character that gets like this talon thing, like through the stomach and up, but you don't really see much. To add sort of the over the top nature, I mean the the boss like goes crazy for whatever reason. Like once they're all down there and they realize there's something else down there with them, he like takes all this soot or dirt, he like smears it on his face, like he's back in wartime. But he's talking about going after the guy Hall, the main character. He's like, it's his fault we're down here. Uh, but what for him? What bad? It's almost like a younger version of Judd Crandall. But Judd Crandall sounded more like a Maynard than he does. So like he wants to go after Hall, and they try to make this guy insufferable. Like he's always sending his employees to go first, and then whenever they're attacked, he just bails, does nothing to help them. Now, I will say, even though it does take your pretty by the numbers steps story wise, where it's just monster in place, group of people alone in place, monster kills all except one, monster gets killed, end of movie. I thought I was gonna have something because they really made the boss like super eccentric. I thought the whole reason that for the shutdown, like he knew this thing was down there, and he like feeds people to this thing, or he knew more than he let on. That's what I thought was gonna happen. No, it's pretty by the numbers as you would expect. I was surprised to see that the love interest gets killed off. Uh, cool how it ends. I mean, the David Andrews is able to get back up. He's where the mill is. He's in this one part. The bat rat chases after him, but its tail lands in like the wheels that pulls all the cotton through. The spiked wheels, the machinery. So his accuracy with the slingshot, hinted at earlier, comes into play. Hits the butt with a soda can. It pulls the rat in. I mean, it's pretty quick. I mean, it'll be like sucked in like halfway. Then it will show David Andrews, and when it cuts back, it's like mangled head is on the conveyor belt. So it's not like we get to see all of it get chewed up. But one thing I thought was a nice touch was as this thing's getting sucked in and crushed, David Andrews is like screaming because, you know, as a bat, it's setting out like this banshee shriek. I thought that was a nice touch. And then it just ends. So yeah, I would put this in the realm of like a Children of the Corn, or, you know, like a Maximum Overdrive. It's not the terrible 90s films, like I said, like Lawnmower Man, The Mangler, or from what I've heard, sometimes they come back. That's one I haven't seen, or Sleepwalkers. It's not that bad. It does have the appeal of just being a classic creature feature. It is very focused. I do like the look of the caverns when they're down in it. I love the matte painting of like that final big room with the pile of skeletons. I love that. The atmosphere is strong. You can really feel the heat, the sweat, the grime. So that was well done. The look of the creature, it's not Stan Winston. It's not Rob Bottin. It does look cheaper, but it doesn't look terrible. It still looks decent. I get why it wasn't shown as much as it could have, but I think, like Jaws, they made it work. The acting, there's not really anyone I buy, really. I mean, I feel like they tried too hard to make David Andrews like a Clint Eastwood badass. The boss is the most memorable, but just because he's so over the top and just so unnatural feeling. But uh, I, it's one of those that it's not one I would revisit a lot. It's not one I was super entertained by, but it definitely had early 90s sort of forgotten Stephen King feel to it. And it was the only one in this collection, one of two in this collection that I had never seen before. It has The Stand, The Langoliers, Golden Years, Dead Zone, Pet Sematary, Silver Bullet, and Graveyard Shift. Now, the only one that I have never seen before would be Golden Years, which is one of the probably the least talked about TV miniseries of his. I've seen all the other ones. But when you look at the spectrum of Stephen King films, especially what's on here, I mean, Dead Zone is pretty far to like the best, one of the best. This is almost the polar opposite. Granted, it's not as bad as The Langoliers, but that's a TV miniseries. So yeah, it's not quite like worst tier for Stephen King, like bottom tier. It's kind of just above it. Again, like Children of the Corn, it feels like it's trying to be serious while still having this campy tone, whether it be intentional or not. And I mean, I again can see why it's a cult film. It's just not one of my favorites. It's one that I guess I mostly, even though I accept most of the flaws, it's just for me it's just kind of there. I guess that's how I feel about it. But that's Stephen King's Graveyard Shift. There is a few more I want to get to throughout October. There's a few more on YouTube that I can check out. Maybe I'll get into the TV miniseries, but they are just so long. I mean, The Stand is like 6 hours. Langoliers is 3. Uh, Golden Years is around 4. Rose Red is like 3 or 4. But Tommyknockers around 3, I think. So we'll see about that. But yeah. So stay tuned for more, and thank you for watching.